Hey, it's me, Queen KB. Welcome to another episode of the Royal Council. This week we'll be discussing our favorite feuds in wrestling history. With me today is, as usual, Baron Botch, Duke Dre, and Noble Natalie. So let's see. I'm going to shake things up. I'm going to start with my favorite feud and leave you guys hanging. I've discussed this a lot I've discussed this a lot through the years. My all-time favorite feuds are the feuds that are between the best of friends. And it's got to go right back to some of my favorites in Triple H and HBK. They are the best when they're DX together. They're the best when they were feuding together. I think it was 2004 when they were feuding in a big, it was 2004, 2005, where they were really feuding against each other. After Shawn came back, they did a little DX and feuded, even taking over the Chris Benoit's WrestleMania match, sort of. I just think the best of friends make for the best of feuds. What about you, Dre?
Yeah, as you were saying that, it actually reminded me of kind of some of those old school crime movies where the drug dealer would go away to prison or he'd get arrested, and then his apprentice would kind of take over and he would kind of run the street, and then the other guy would get out of prison and he'd want his crew back. And that's kind of what the Shawn Michaels Triple H dynamic kind of reminded me of. It's like Shawn Michaels was the guy in DX. He was the guy that kind of brought Triple H along and kind of elevated him. And Shawn Michaels went away with the back injury. He was gone for 4 years. And when he came back, Triple H was the guy on the block now that was running things. And so Triple H is looking at Shawn like, you're my best friend. You kind of got me to this point, but I'm not giving you back control again, And so that's where the clash happened. And that angle right there, man, just from SummerSlam 2002 all the way to, I think it was Bad Blood 2004, that Iron Man Hell in a Cell match that they had. I mean, that is the true blood feud. You talked about bitter rivals, best friends. I mean, they go back and forth, and they're like brothers. They fight, they make up, they fight, they make up. But it's like they just bound to do it forever,
And it just felt right to me.
Yeah. I mean, two of the best in business at storytelling. Two of the greatest personalities in wrestling. Just two of the greats on the mic. I mean, it fireworks, perfect,
They're so well-rounded.
Yeah.
I see you chomping at the bit, Botch. Go for it.
Oh, I was actually just listening because I think that really was a good feud. There's such good friends, and as was said earlier, the best friends make the best enemies on TV, and kind of going hand in hand with that. The best feud I've ever seen was the feud that went on for years between Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair. That is basically, for me anyway, that's the feud on which all other feuds must be judged. That feud went on forever. I mean, think of it, right? You had these two characters that were so completely different from one another.
Oh, yeah.
This overly privileged, bleach blonde, rich boy that just that had everything, all the finest things that money could buy. No need for the slogan. We've all heard it a million times.
Right.
And then you have the plumber's son from Texas, who came from nothing, who came from hard times, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, just that a feud can give birth to the greatest promo in the history of sports entertainment. There's a lot to be said for that. And I don't remember exactly how long that feud went, but it went on for years. It was multi-layered. It didn't just involve those two individuals. It was wrapped up because for a while Dusty was in a feud with Arn, and then in a feud with Tully, and then Rick was in feuds with others as well, but they always kind of dovetailed back to each other. And the fact is, they were incredibly good friends. They were very, very close. In fact, when Rick first got into the business, he was known as Ramblin' Ricky Rhodes because he wanted to be like Dusty.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's weird. He's naturally brown hair, but much larger. He was a
before the plane crash.
dude.
Before the plane crash.
Yeah.
Prior to the
Yeah.
plane crash, when he
Yeah.
lost a bunch of weight and kind of had to modify the way he bumped and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Because if you ever noticed when Ric Flair took a back body drop, he would
Always on his hip.
land on his side.
Mhm.
Yeah, because he couldn't land flat anymore because of the plane crash. But that, like, for me, I mean, that feud gave birth to the most incredible promos, the most incredible matches. And it's not like those matches were incredibly well worked. We're not talking Ricochet here, but that's not necessary. What was necessary was the ebb and the flow of the match and the way that how expressive their faces were, especially like when Rick would get trapped in a figure four courtesy of Dusty. You would think the world was ending. He took his own move better than anything I've ever seen. It was
That's
the
so true.
coolest thing ever. It's just
Mhm.
that, to me, I won't go on anymore. I could go on for years about that feud, but it was just the greatest feud I've ever seen.
I have to wonder, it came to my mind while you were discussing it, if that's what WWE was trying to do with Cena and Orton through the years, was
I
trying
was
to
gonna,
capture that, the back
I
and
was gonna,
forth.
I was
I
gonna bring that one
honestly,
up too.
I hadn't even thought about that until you were explaining, because Orton and Cena seem to go on for years, but they do other things and then they come
Mhm.
back. And I was thinking about it now, I really think they might have been trying to capture some of that vibe.
I could see that.
Yeah, I can too. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, maybe. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's like when it comes to a feud like that, there are exactly two people who can pull it off. After they've done it, don't try to get too close to it. And the deft thing that Cena and Orton did is that they didn't try to get too close to it.
No.
They would get up against it sometimes, but then they were still themselves and could do it their own way.
And the
Right.
thing about, I think Cena put it beautifully or poetically back in 2013 when they were unifying the titles. Orton was supposed to be that guy. Like, he was the third generation guy. He was groomed for the business. I mean, he was born into it. Triple H handpicked him. Him and Flair handpicked him. And the only difference between Cena and Orton, because it wasn't that Orton wasn't capable. I mean, he was one of the most athletically gifted, God gifted talented wrestlers you've ever seen. He just couldn't keep it together outside the ring. Like, he just had so many different personality issues. He's so immature,
Yeah.
and he was very unreliable at that phase in his career when they wanted to push him as the guy. And John Cena, he was when he first came in. Remember, he wasn't supposed to be what he became.
No.
He dressed up as Vanilla Ice one year, and Stephanie took notice, and it just that just took off from there. But it, like Kendra said, Cena was supposed to be like the blue collar guy to Orton's, white collar,
Right.
Privilege. And Cena put it perfectly. It was like, you're supposed to be the guy, but basically what Cena was saying was, in the bottom of the ninth inning, when you need that crucial hit, Orton's not that guy. John Cena is. It's like Derek Cheater and A-Rod. A-Rod's, he's got the numbers and he's got the looks, but he just doesn't have that intangible, that trait that John Cena had to get it over the hump. And that's one of my favorite. Yeah, that's probably my favorite modern feud of the 2000s or 2010s or whatever era you want to place it in. I guess it kind of crosses over, but yeah, they've had some classics. They've had some really good promos. I remember the video package they did. I think it was Civil Twilight, The Sky Is Falling, right before the bragging rights match. Really, really good. Summed up everything perfectly.
For me, for Randy Orton, I prefer his feud with Triple H. I just thought it was so savage.
I
breaking
like
into the house and the Stephanie handcuffed to
Yeah,
the bottom row.
they had some really good stuff, but for some reason their chemistry never really clicked for me. I mean, they've had some good matches, but I've always preferred seeing Orton's chemistry over Triple H and Orton.
It is more natural.
Yeah.
I think so too.
And I'm just about to go to Natalie, and she takes a drink. Okay, Natalie, what?
Well, my favorite one wasn't even between wrestlers. I was telling you guys last night. It was between the WCW and WWE. Back then. The owners, Ted Turner, he wanted to put WWE out of business. And he really tried.
Yep.
Yeah. And I can remember sitting there going back and forth on my cable box. There's one of them slider ones for years. between the two channels. And usually it stayed on WCW because that was more interesting.
Same.
Oh,
Yeah,
but
I had the exact same experience you did. And the interesting thing too, Natalie, I agree with you, is that they really, Eric often tells the story of, before he took over, of sitting there with his yellow legal pad, writing down all the ways that WCW could be different from WWE so that it really was a true alternative. And it absolutely worked. I mean, for me, and I think this is probably what, I know this is what I responded to, and maybe you did too as well, Natalie, but the fact that WCW felt more immediate, it felt more in your face. WWE has always felt very cavernous. That's just
Yes.
kind of the way that they deal with their programming. But WCW was every bit as big. It just didn't feel that way. That's not the way they shot it. They shot it much more in your face. There were more close-ups, more intense angles. The audio was hotter, if that makes any sense. It was all done to make it look more immediate than WWE did. And I, just like Natalie, I always preferred that approach. Plus the storylines in WCW, especially when we were watching it, they were just angrier and more visceral. I mean,
and I can't stand that they think that when they're angry they have to have this deep guttural voice. They change their voice in the promos and stuff. And I'd be
they
like,
just
that is
talked.
so fake.
They just talked. Like Kevin
Yeah.
Nash would just talk.
Yeah.
He didn't need to yell at you. He would, and it made the times when he did yell so much more potent because he didn't yell all the time. Scott Hall didn't yell. Dallas Page would yell, but not always. But they understood nuance. They kind of understood the way that Jake Roberts used to do things, because Jake didn't yell either. But the moments that he did, it meant so much more. And WCW really seemed to understand the importance of the ebb and flow of talking versus yelling in a way that WWE didn't. Every promo was yelling from everybody. So I always
Which
really
is,
like that too.
and
just
that's still an issue with the
It is.
WWE. But one thing I like about the Ted Turner, Vince McMahon thing is you had that in the background, yet you also had the Eric Bischoff, Vince McMahon feud going on television. So it was really, I like if anyone was paying attention, you knew it was Ted Turner, but on TV, it was Eric Bischoff who said all the words.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, Ted basically gave the show to Eric to run. He's like, you do it, I'll give you the money. Basically just gave him a blank checkbook. So a lot of the things that were spoken, like, for instance, when Tony Schiavone was recapping episodes from Raw, like that was totally Eric to do that. And further, when they recapped that championship match that Mick Foley was involved in, where he finally won the belt, he said, well, that ought to put the butts in seats. Like that was totally an Eric Bischoff thing.
And that backfired big time. That was
God, the biggest mistake they could possibly make. Yeah, who knew?
And
I
well,
would have switched over if I was watching.
who knew? A, who knew? But B, Tony is known for almost handing that set, the ratings to the WWE that night. It was Mick Foley and Tony Schiavone who were instrumental in changing the ratings, not just Mick Foley.
Oh, completely.
You know what one of the first shots fired was when Lex Luger showed up at was it Mall of America?
What is he doing here?
Yeah, that was because I remember I've always been a WWE guy, but I was always aware of WCW and I would watch.
Oh,
but yeah, surprise, right? But I remember I was about I guess 11 when this happened, and Luger showed up in WCW, and I'm just like, what the hell, like that's not American, that's not the Lex Express that I know, you know what I mean? And so it was a shock, and
he literally just left TV like a week ago.
Yeah.
And of course he knew weeks ahead. He just kept his mouth shut.
Yeah, because he was at SummerSlam literally 4 or 5 days ago, and then he was in WCW. The same thing happened with Razor and Diesel. They were just on WWE programming post WrestleMania, and now they're going back and forth with commentary. I'm like what's going on? And you'll never be able to capture that feeling again because you have too many dirt sheets. People want to spoil stuff, and people want to get their name out there, and they have an agenda, so they just can't be wrestling fans anymore. And you can't top that. Like there's this is way before I started reading dirt sheets or before I knew who Meltzer or anybody else was, and completely shocked, just jaw dropping. seeing
Yeah,
that.
and well, and two, I mean, I think the thing that's killed that is the non-compete clause, which makes
Yes.
perfect sense if you're WWE. I mean, you got to protect your own intellectual property, but that's
Yeah.
the main reason why things like that can never happen again. It's just
Yeah.
the
Well, the thing is, it has happened in this century, though, or I don't remember. It's got to be within this decade. When Kurt Angle did so, he left to take some time off. He was injured. He wasn't feeling well. And of course, Vince wouldn't give him a 90-day non-compete clause because there was no reason to think Angle was going anywhere. And then, boom, our big shocker, he was in TNA and everybody kept their mouth shut. And that
big,
was, huh?
big.
You know what I remember about that? There
It
were
was,
rumors.
go ahead, Dre.
Yeah, there were rumors that he was gonna try his hand in MMA. Those are the fillers that his team put out that kind of divert attention away from him signing with
Mhm.
TNA. They really played that one really well.
They did. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. But it was Impact. But it was. I was about to say it was Impact, but it was TNA. And granted, TNA was doing better than they are now. But it was just TNA.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this wasn't moving over to something that had really good ratings or anything like that. It was just.
No, but I mean, it still. I thought it still was pretty effective, pretty
It
impactful.
was. No, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. It didn't
Yeah.
quite have the no pun intended impact that it
Yeah.
might have had he appeared on a show with really good ratings like
Yeah, I agree.
WCW or something like that. Like the whole Mall of America thing was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Was all
Yeah.
said that Lex WCW thing was such a shocker. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
so Eric now means business. Now we're serious.
And that was the first night of Nitro.
Yeah, it was the
Yeah.
very first night
Yeah.
of it at Mall of America. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was brilliantly done.
it really was. Yeah.
I'm going to pull a feud that not many people will think about because it is a TNA feud, and people will roll their eyes at me and all of that because it's somebody I'm known to love. Yep, get ready, Botch.
Okay.
It's Bobby Roode and EY and the whole "Don't Fire Eric" stuff. I just thought that was a lot of fun and really well handled for TNA. I won't say it was a fantastic feud in all of wrestling history, but for TNA, I thought it was a really solidly built and executed feud.
I actually didn't see it.
Dead silence.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm terrible.
Yeah. I
can't
don't think
play
I was.
along.
Yeah, I don't think I was watching TNA at that point.
I didn't even
It
see
was,
it.
that's when I really fell in love with both characters and both wrestlers. But
There's a
who
lot
else?
to-
do you have? Go
There's
ahead.
a lot to love. They're both fantastic characters. I mean, they were both of them were really, really good there. Eric specifically is probably amongst the most underrated workers in the business, period.
Him and Heath Slater.
Yeah, agree. Especially after last week.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're both just absolutely fantastic characters, especially when they were in TNA. I just didn't see them feud. I must have missed it.
It's really good. Really, it felt. I'm going to go back to my term that WWE is finally using, but not giving us. They gave us grit, and EY and Rude just gave so much grit in that feud. I mean, they've been Team Canada together. They'd really done so much, and then basically the storyline was Rude had control of EY's contract.
Oh.
And so he was constantly making him get him coffee and carry his bags and all of the horrible, stuff like they did, Test and Scotty Steiner did to Stacy Keibler, just all that horrible stuff. And, the fans were always chanting because he was always threatening to fire him. Don't fire EY. And it was just, that was the feud that made me I can't believe I'm saying this, fall in love with parts of TNA. Shut up, Botch.
She's like, don't think in that tone of voice. No,
I could see it.
Bobby Roode is great slime.
He is.
He's such an untapped resource in WWE. It's like you have such fantastic slime here, and you're not letting him be slime. Like,
And they captured that in NXT, but they haven't really. They turned him face. They turned him face on the main roster. Yeah, why turn him face on the main roster? Just keep him the way he is. It's like they almost
And he has like the
And
slimiest theme in the history of sports entertainment. Like,
he wears a robe. I mean, how do you? You're not
Yes.
supposed to like a guy that wears a robe. Who wears a
He
robe?
wears a robe. Beautiful.
other than
But
Rick,
he
yeah.
wears it
Right.
well.
He
He wears
does.
it
Oh yeah, he
No,
does.
he really does. That's the thing. That's what we're saying. He pulls the whole thing off so well. It's like you've got
Yeah.
great slime here. Use the slime.
And they're pushing Dolph Ziggler rather than Bobby Roode.
Well, I think Rude is stuck in Canada right now.
Oh, that's true. I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
I think he's stuck in Canada or
But
something. along those
Dolph,
lines.
Dolph is a casualty of writing, not of character. I mean, I
No,
think Dolph
not at all.
is fantastic.
But he's been working for so many years that it's just like Big Show. He's just become a joke.
It's the writing. He's just not believable anymore. They've written him out of believability.
Like Big Show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Who they turn
Big Show
face and heel 5 times a show. Yeah.
Well, Big Show
Right.
had some good runs, though. Back in the day. I just don't feel like it's necessary to really push him anymore at this point, or put him in a key role like that.
Oh yeah,
But can you
definitely
pick
not.
out a really good Big Show feud?
Yeah, he had a feud with Sheamus back in 2011. They had some very underrated big man matches that I really enjoyed.
His
I
feud
think
with the NWO was fantastic.
It was. I will give you
My
that.
gosh,
Yeah.
that was delicious.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah, okay,
so
I
good
will
because
give you that.
he never, I mean, think of it. Like when he was in the NWO, he wasn't ever really given a chance to talk.
No.
He was just he wasn't trained well either because he was trained down in the power plant where talent goes to die.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't trained properly. He wasn't really allowed to speak. He was just kind of this big lumbering dude
Mhm.
that just kind of hung around and really quickly kicked people and ended matches. And then finally, when he got into that feud, all of a sudden we saw his personality. And there was so much there. There really was. He really showed us a tremendous depth of character when he was feuding with the NWO because he had so many people to feud with. It was
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
the NWO. I think Natalie probably like this too. Like when you feuded with the NWO, you weren't just feuding with one person. You're feuding with like 8.
Yeah.
You could have all these separate storylines going on within this entity that you were feuding with. It's what made the whole thing so brilliant. Why I love WCW. Probably the biggest reason I love WCW.
Until NWO got bigger than the rest of the roster and became a
But it had
travesty.
colors. It had
It was
colors.
black and white.
The black and white, the
Yes.
red and black, the wolf pack, the this, the that, the
Wow.
Shirts. So many shirts. So many different color shirts.
That when they got to that point was after I'd already gone and moved away from where I had cable. So I didn't
Right.
see that.
It's like,
you're lucky.
is that a shark? Like it was so it
They
just got
have-
it became
oh,
ridiculous. And for some reason they couldn't even see it. Go ahead, Natalie. I'm sorry.
Didn't they have Hogan in the NWO at one point?
Oh well,
Yes.
yeah.
He was
He
the
was in
third
both.
member.
Oh, well, he'd be why I wouldn't watch it. He was like, yeah, bathroom time.
Because it was supposed to be originally the fun fact for 2 people who may not know. It was actually not supposed to be Hulk Hogan. It was supposed to be Ted DiBiase. He was supposed to be the voice box for the NWO.
I heard.
That's-
I've heard various different things. I heard that Bret Hart was offered that third spot when he was on a sabbatical from WF in '96 after he dropped the title to Shawn Michaels. He had actually got a
Really?
big contract. I heard that he was talked about being in that role, and then Sting was another guy that they were talking about
Sting.
flipping. Yeah.
Sting's the one I heard, and he
Yeah.
really didn't
heard
want to
that
do
too.
it, but he would have taken one for the company, but he really did not want to turn heel in that way.
No, not
Yeah.
at all. I remember
And
that.
so when
Yeah.
Hogan called Bischoff and said, "So who's the third man?" and Bischoff's like, "I can't tell you." He's like, "I know who it is." He's like, "No, you don't." He's like, "Yes, I do. It's me." And Bish went, "Oh,
Because he saw the train leaving the station, he wanted to get on it. He saw the money
Right.
train leaving the station. He was
Yeah.
smart. He wanted the money, and boy, did he get it.
You know
oh
who
my
benefited?
gosh."
And everybody benefited from that. WWF, WCW, every wrestling benefited from that heel turn.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
I
Everyone
agree with
wins.
that. I feel the only people who didn't benefit from that was the cruiserweights.
Well, I'm talking about just wrestling as a whole, as far as it.
wrestling as a whole, it was just
Yeah.
so
The cruiserweights just got murdered. Absolutely
Exactly.
murdered. They went out and they put in work. At the beginning of all of those shows, they put in work, but they were only ever allowed to set the stage. They were allowed to set the table. They were never allowed to eat.
right.
Well, it was a different time too. The late '90s, it was still more about the polarizing characters and how well you did on the mic as opposed to what you did inside the ring. You know, as opposed to what we've seen today.
True. And I mean, let's be real about it here. Dean Malenko is one of the most incredible workers I've ever seen, but he can't talk.
Yeah.
No, he can't. But the thing is, they could have given him a mouthpiece.
Yes, they could have.
Plenty around. They just never did. Yeah, I thought he did better, even if just briefly. I thought he did pretty well with when the four of them went to the WWE together, because there was Eddie to talk. There was Saturn to look in two different directions. There was Benoit who could talk a little. Sorry, I love Perry Saturn. He was amazing in the ring. He was one of my favorites by far.
I agree.
Such good worker.
Yes. Yes.
And since I threw the name out, and I'm going to catch a lot of cancel culture crap for this, one of my favorite short feuds, and it was after both of them went to the WWE, there was a best of 7 series between Booker T and Chris Benoit. That was a short feud.
I remember that.
SmackDown. It was a best of 7 matches. But you gotta go rewatch that. It was so beautiful. It was a short feud, but it was so beautifully executed between the two. And
wasn't Booker T up 3-0 at one point, and then Chris Benoit came back, tied up the series, and then Booker had to keep getting like substitutes or something along those lines. Like I think Randy Orton.
I think so. Yeah.
Booker faked an injury.
Yeah.
He got out of or something along those lines. But yeah, they had a really good series of matches.
It was short, but it was really well executed. And sometimes those short feuds, can be really good.
Actually, speaking of feuds that were one feud in particular that we're leaving out. I know I'm typically known for going back into the mothballs, but there's no reason to with this one. Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano.
Yes. Yeah, that's an extension of Shawn Michaels and Triple H. That's what that is. Yeah.
That feud, though. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. They started out as this tag team, DIY, of course. That was nice and all. It was adorable.
They were good, though. They were an impressive tag team.
They were good, but it just didn't mean much. But when they broke off from each other, like...
You know what's funny about that, though? When they did break up, people were questioning Triple H. Like, why did you break them up? Do you remember that?
I don't.
When they broke them up?
I believe you. I just don't remember.
Yeah, people were really questioning, like, why'd you break them up for? That doesn't make any sense. What possibly could you do with them now?
Oops.
Yeah, exactly. This is why we watching. This is why he's booking.
Let me guess. It was fans that said it.
Yeah. Yep.
I love fans. I dig fans.
The thing is, even though they were feuding with other people now, and now Ciampa's the face and Gargano's the heel and all of that, even through all of that, it feels like they're going to come back and feud again. It's not over.
It feels very Dusty and Rick. We talked about that at the very beginning. You could go back to that forever. As long as they wrestle, you can always go back. There's always meat on that bone. Always.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it disappoints me, though, because I think Gargano he was turning heel, or he was a heel, and Candice LeRae was saying, what are you doing? Why are you aligning with this man? Look at all the awful stuff he did. And I always got the impression that Gargano was doing that just to get close to Ciampa so he can get his revenge. It's kind of like a Count of Monte Cristo type of thing where he was playing chess, while everybody else was playing checkers, and they never really got to conclude that because he got hurt. They never really had a chance to go back to that. And that's I mean, I don't know if that's what the plan was, but I always felt that that's what they were going with.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I mean, in terms of that role, that was nothing Candice was good at. She's just not a very good face character. She's a fantastic heel. Like as Poison Pixie, she's killing it.
She
is. A face, the woman couldn't act. It was just not good at all. When she would cut promos, they would just be choppy and not believable, and she was not helping. So I do see what you mean, but I'm kind of glad that part of it ended, if only for the fact that we wouldn't have to see her do that anymore, because she wasn't good.
Yeah. And speaking of feuds, since we're talking about the women, the one that got me interested in NXT, Sasha Banks and Bayley.
Yes.
I honestly don't remember the backstory with them on NXT. I just know that they were really close friends. I just remember the matches, though. I watched the matches, and I was blown away. And from then on, I was an NXT fan, and I truly believe that it was those 2 matches that they had at the takeovers. Is why we're here with the women today. Is why we're here with the women today. Like there's Trish and Lita, but there's Bayley and Sasha.
No,
Bailey and Sasha.
there's Sasha and Bailey, and then somewhere else there's Trisha.
Yeah.
and Rita. That's
And if it
cute
was-
and all, but
if it
like
wasn't-
Sasha and Bailey
yeah.
is just
And if it wasn't for Sasha Bailey, we don't get Charlotte and Becky.
no, we
No.
don't. There's no
Yeah.
way.
So, well, we don't get like any of the amazing women who have been
Yeah.
called. We
Yeah.
don't get Rhea Ripley. We don't
Mhm.
get Maya Yim. We don't get any of these women who are killing it now.
Yeah,
We'd
Yeah.
be
that's true.
still watching Natty playing with Alicia Fox. No offense to either of them.
Yeah, and I'm just glad that they're finally getting the chance to really prove their worth. You know, anytime they've been on NXT, they've moved the needle. I know when they first turned Bailey heel, I was kind of skeptical of her turning heel, and I was kind of skeptical of them doing the whole Sasha Bailey thing again. Because I'm just like, they've done this before and they never do anything with it. But it looks like they've really gone all in on this angle this time. And when it finally blows up, the match that we're gonna get, it's gonna be really, really good. I'm looking forward to it.
I hope.
They had to do something with Bailey because she was just completely unconvincing as a face. I mean, she fell from grace hard.
You know, I thought she was a good
Amazing.
face. I just thought her booking was terrible. Like this is your life, Bailey. That just wasn't the writing wasn't very good for that.
She just wasn't, to me anyway. This is just my opinion. I could be wrong, but she just wasn't a good enough actress to pull off face. Like I just didn't believe anything she said. She was tentative in the ring. She would botch. It's like all of a sudden, it's like she's found her mojo, for lack of a better term.
The thing
Now that
is,
she's better.
when she
I
was
think.
face in NXT, it worked.
It works.
Though.
Yeah.
Oh, completely.
It was the writing when she got up to Raw and SmackDown that.
Because I think Bailey she's a naturally nice person. I think that's the vibe I get from her. I've seen her do interviews as a heel, and she still comes off as a very, very nice person. You know, in her interviews when she's trying to be a heel. But it's working though. But
Yeah,
Are
no,
you
she's
guys saying
killing
that at
it as a
one
heel.
point Bailey wasn't boring?
Yeah. No, she wasn't. Her work in NXT
Yeah,
with Sasha
yeah.
Banks was amazing, Natalie. You should see some of them.
Yes.
I'll play a couple of the matches for you specifically.
yeah, that's why we have Evolution. That's why the women are able to go to Saudi Arabia now. That I go back to those particular matches. That's when everybody was like, hey, these women can go, man. Let's see what they can do in the main roster, man. Let's do it on the big stage. And
Show stealing matches,
yeah.
and they just haven't recaptured that amazing.
yeah.
Mm,
But I think they're finally going to though. I'm
hope
putting
so.
my faith, that they're actually going to get it done this time.
She's gotten more interesting, but she has been extremely boring the entire time I've seen her on the main one.
I agree.
Really boring. And she has bad taste in clothes.
that too. Oh my gosh, she can't dress to save her. Ooh. Her ring
Only a
gear,
matter
her
of
ring
time.
gear looks horrible on her too. I'm gonna take a note from Botch's book and go back a bit on a feud. One of the main feuds in ECW, Tommy Dreamer versus Raven.
Oh, I'd
You
forgotten
didn't
about
see that one coming, did you?
That was so good. Oh, it was so good. It's all the best feuds are like when it's the personification of good versus evil. And I'm not sure that there's a better example of that than Raven, who was just pure evil, and Tommy Dreamer, who was pure good, just the goodest
And
of
one of the
good.
sweetest people I've ever met.
Really
Raven?
nice guy.
Oh God,
Raven or
Tommy
Dreamer?
Dreamer.
I spent like an hour talking to him one day. He was just so lovely.
Yeah, very nice.
I
man.
actually met Raven before. That was interesting. That was very interesting.
Interesting in what way?
I don't know. He's just a different type of dude. Like just
Seems
the
that way.
way he talks and the way he thinks and if the way he moves, everything about him is just.
He's very intelligent from everything
He
I've
is.
heard. Very
He is.
intelligent.
He's very intelligent, but he's just
Eerily so.
he's
Yeah.
just a very different type of cat. Like I can't really. Kind of hard to describe him. Kind of hard to put him in a particular box, but he's definitely interesting though.
Same. I could say the same for Gangrel.
I could imagine.
He
Very
was
Luna, you got him
really
interesting.
deep, but very interesting.
Yes, I can see that.
But yeah, I Tommy Dreamer and Raven really just. I think they, in a lot of ways, made ECW into what it was. And yeah, there were the Dudleys and all of that. and Taz and oh God, Taz, and everyone else. But it was those two who really had that beautiful feud that put ECW on the map.
Yes. Yes. They were the centerpiece of just about everything great in ECW there for a while.
Yeah.
Such a good, the promos, all of those delicious promos. I'm trying to tell you, my gosh, I would tune in just for those promos. I didn't
yeah,
care how long they went. I mean, Tommy Dreamer is one of the most passionate people in sports entertainment. Raven, just the rhythm of his promos was just bizarre. Like they just made music together. It was just fantastic feud. I agree completely.
So you haven't who else has a great feud you want to discuss before we wrap it up tonight?
I guess the Hardys and Edge and Christian.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't think I was really that big into tag wrestling prior to. I mean, we had the New Age Outlaws, obviously, but I was never really big into tag wrestling until those two teams hit the scene. Just they're so innovative. Like I said, Austin and The Rock, they were the draws, but those guys were the workhorses, and the way they put their bodies on the line.
Yeah, they shortened their careers.
Yeah,
I remember Edge saying that when he had to spear Jeff Hardy, who was hanging, he was standing up there knowing he was taking 5 years off his life with what he was about to do.
Yep.
And he just took a deep breath and did it because he knew if he thought about it anymore, he wouldn't do it.
Yeah, he checked.
And I was at WrestleMania 2000. I know that that particular mania is pretty. It gets crapped on a lot, and understandably, because I watched it back on DVD years later. I'm just kind of like, yeah, if you weren't there, I could see how you wouldn't like this. But I remember the triple threat ladder match, with the Dudleys involved, and I remember that we were there live, and it just blew my mind. I lost my voice watching that match.
Oh, I'm sure you would. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And then they had and then there was a match prior to that. I think it was No Mercy of '99. I think that was the first. I think that was the first TLC match, I believe, or I don't remember.
Yeah, I thought that was the ladder match between Hardys and ENC.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, No Mercy, and that was the match that really got me like into them, in particular. But yeah, the one that was the triple threat match I was at live was amazing. Like I can't really describe it how it was to be there in person to see that.
Oh,
like
I'm sure.
Like every possible thing you could do off a ladder, they did it. And yeah, that rivalry, I used, obviously goes all the way into Matt Hardy and Edge and things like that. But I just remember that tag rivalry was just amazing.
It really was good. We could even go. I'm going back to the mothballs because there's another one that I just thought of too, and this was less about the combatants more than it was about Jim Cornette, but the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express.
Right.
Oh
yep. Yeah.
Come on. I mean, to be fair, like because excuse me, excuse me. I can't talk. Gibson couldn't really talk, but Morton really could. And between he and Jim Cornette, because Eaton couldn't really talk either, but Cornette and Morton drove that thing for such a long time. They drove that train. I mean, during matches with the Rock and Roll Express and the Jobbers du jour, whoever they were, Jim Cornette would be on the mic with either Gordon Soley or with Tony Schiavone, just ripping them limb from limb while the match was going on. And just, I mean, we could say what we want to about Jim Cornette, but sharp dude, really sharp guy that could just kind of keep up with virtually anything. And just between his mic work and the stories that they would tell in the ring, between the four of them, it's just an absolutely fabulous feud. Certainly one of the great ones, in my opinion.
Taking it way back there.
Oh yeah, back to the 80s. That's what I did. Sorry.
Yeah.
Any other feuds? Anyone?
Good.
I feel like I obligatory need to throw this one out there just because it was so much a part of wrestling of its time. and I'm just going to hit on briefly before we head out. It's the Superpowers when they were feuding.
Oh,
Hogan and
yeah.
Savage just completely. They needed, as much as I dislike Hogan, they needed to be mentioned here as a great feud in the industry.
That might be, in my opinion, the greatest feud of all time. Because I remember when Savage won the title at WrestleMania 4, and Hogan, and they're all celebrating in the ring, and Hogan was celebrating with Elizabeth, and Savage cut Hogan this one look. It was very subtle, very subtle.
Yep.
You had to really pay attention to catch it. And like they planted everything so beautifully. Like the whole thing was written out to perfection. Savage being Savage looking at Hogan, like you held Elizabeth's hand for 2 seconds too long. I didn't like that. And it's real because I think at one point every guy's felt that way. You're with a girl that you really like, that you're into, and you see her interact with your friends, and every so often you'll look like, okay, don't get too close now. And it hits home. It hits home. And I've been on the other side of that. I've been accused of stuff before. And I think any guy can relate to that. You can't write a better feud than that. And like I said, everything was placed so perfectly. Like I said, from the look that Savage cut Hogan at WrestleMania 4 to the Royal Rumble when Hogan accidentally eliminated Savage and Elizabeth having to come down and smooth things over. And then there was a tag match at Saturday Night Main Event against the Twin Towers when Elizabeth got hurt. Hogan had to pick her up and take her backstage, and Savage got upset about that. And, his paranoia set in. And I see both sides of the coin. Like, like Hogan wasn't trying to do anything. He wasn't trying to push up on her. But from Savage's viewpoint, I could see how he could take it that way.
Oh, yeah. And Savage was so subtle. And I mean, he was so loud and over the top, but he was also so subtle in how he did things.
Yeah.
Even later in his career, when he was in WCW, he still had that subtlety. Mm-hmm. Not as good as early WWE or WWF, but as much as Hogan has become the butt of the wrestling joke and the one who's easiest to abuse, he did have some really amazing times in the industry.
Yeah, and I can't believe I overlooked that feud, but in my opinion, that's probably the greatest feud of all time.
It's up there.
Yes. And even looking back, like after they both had retired, or not really retired, but kind of moved on, a lot of that stuff really happened. Savage, he really blamed Hogan for breaking up his marriage. He blamed Hogan and Linda, and that's life imitating art. Like you can't make that stuff up.
No. And I guess that's it for this week, if no one has anything else to say.
And don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to comment down below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify or Podbean, good on you. Thanks for doing it. But yeah, you can interact with us over on YouTube, and we will talk back, we promise. So feel free to do that.
And on Wrestle Royalty, we'll talk back. And on our Facebook page, we'll talk back. Even Twitter, we'll get a little chatty at times. So for Wrestle Royalty, I'm Queen KB, Botch, Dre, and Natalie. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week, and stay safe. That's the most important thing these days.